All right, guys, we're back with another edition of Casey Music Talk. My guest today is the owner of Casey Strings, Anton Krutz. How's it going?
Doing great.
Sweet. So the first time I met you was, I believe, at your house.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been, 93, 92, something like that. I was 10.
Yes. Yeah,
and so, but we came to your house, and I think we probably fixed up my mom's instrument or whatever, but that was when you guys were at the house, and you guys have gone,
we opened up the shop in '92,
Mm-hmm.
and so we've been in business in Miriam ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How long were you at the house before you?
Well, it was I actually opened up the business with my father, Misha, who was and the business was in his house, and I was actually all the years before that I was in. Violin making school, and I was restoring instruments in New York, in Manhattan. And so then it came back in 92 and opened up Casey Strings. And originally we were just going to make high-end instruments and do high-end restorations, because that's what I knew. And then clients kept coming in, teachers kept coming in, and we had more and more demand for student repairs and for student instruments. And so we just expanded the shop with more and more people, and now we have in Casey Strings close to 30 people working, and we expanded to have our own instrument line of Krutz string instruments that we sell all over the world.
Yeah, wow.
And so I wish I could say that it was planned from the very beginning in 1992, but that's not how things work.
Sure.
We were going to just originally open up what we call in business just a boutique shop, just as have a small shop, how violin shops are, small shops, one person, a few people working, and it just snowballed and expanded.
Yeah, that's cool, because I know I've been a supporter of your guys' shop for a while, and I've definitely seen how I'm sure you guys get you guys have a really good balance of having, dealing with all of the rentals and the fourth graders and that kind of thing, but you guys also have some pretty high end decent instruments at your shop, and that symphony players would play on, and then also like restoring high end instruments, which I know, and I'll just say it, people like REW, that's just not what they do, I mean, they're selling to, they're selling only to the, kind of the school kids, and but so you guys were starting with the intention of doing high end, huh?
Yeah, everything started as a violin maker, as a restorer. That was the paradigm that I was trained in. In violin making school, you're a violin maker. You go to restore instruments. You restore, these nice instruments. And when we came to Kansas City, part of the local Kansas City that they knew us, that there was no shop, that the teachers came and said, "Hey, can you get better instruments for our students?" And then I saw these rental instruments that other music stores had, and they were awful. And I thought, "Oh my gosh, these instruments are going to be hurting our future clientele," because the kids actually need the better instrument, because the professional knows there's a problem. But the kid, if they're playing a bad instrument, then they say, "Oh, the problem's with me." And so so we started sourcing better student instruments, and it expanded from there. One of the interesting parts about Casey Strings that's unique amongst most shops in the world is that we have violin repair to restoration, which shops do, but then we also do violin, violoncello, and bass. Most of the time, string shops sell basses. They're called bass shops, right?
Yeah.
And then also violin makers in the violin making world, they make violins, violas, and cellos. But if you make basses, well, you're a bass maker, because so these basses are a separate thing. But my father, who was principal bass at one point in the Kansas City Philharmonic, and then was in the Kansas City Symphony, and was professor at UMKC and KU. He's a bass player, and so we of course dealt with basses.
Right.
And so we've had people come in that didn't know that we dealt with violins, violas, and cellos, because they're in basses. They go, "Oh wow, you deal with these," and then people that were dealing with violins, violas, or basses, and vice versa. So and same thing with making. The bass maker goes, oh, you make violins, violas, and cellos, and vice versa. So the fact that we have this entire full line of student to professional violin, viola, cello, and bass, and we make professional violin, viola, cello, basses, and sell and rent. This entire full service is a really unique aspect. And there's only probably just a handful of shops in the world that really do that extensive work. And so one of the neat things is that we can do restorations that nobody else can. We can we've done restorations on basses where the entire top was broken, but as makers we made a completely new top. We're able to match the varnish because as makers we can do that. And restorations and things like that. So the uniqueness of interconnecting aspects of our field, all aspects, gives us this unique strength.
Yeah, that's cool. I know that you said something about, I get this asked a lot of how much does the violin really help? A lot of people that don't play, they're like, aren't they kind of all the same? And I'm like, no, they're not at all the same, and because what I always tell the students is they always see the purple violin or whatever in their eye, they're like looking at the cereal aisle, they're like all the pretty colors, but I always tell them that you give a really terrible instrument to a really good player and they're going to shred your face off, but you give them a really good instrument and it's going to be it's just going to be way better. And so like it really does make a difference for those kids, like the tone.
It does.
Right? Especially...
it's not just the tone. The tone is one thing, but also the setup. Because our student instruments, our rental student instruments, they're set up in the same professional manner as the upper line advanced and professional instruments. So all they're getting as they're upgrading is better and better sound.
Right.
But the feel of the instrument is still on the professional level.
Yeah.
Whereas
like the action.
The actions, the bridge, the curvature, because you get a bridge that's too flat, you're hitting you're hitting three strings at once. Yeah. It's over. I mean, you can't play, right? And so, or the nut's too high, or there's things like that. Now, the other issue is that as a violin shop that deals with everyone from students to professionals, we understand if there's an issue, right? So when the teacher calls and says, hey, it's not playing, or the teacher just sends in the student and sends, there's an issue, they're not even sure what, because they didn't have the time to even themselves try to analyze it.
Right.
We could look at it and go, here's the problem. And sometimes people come in and they say, I don't know, I'm not comfortable or something, the problem. Then we can analyze and understand what's going on, versus another shop or possibly a music store that doesn't have this breadth of experience. Right. They don't know. Yeah. So there's so many nuances to a string instrument being set up correctly that you need to understand it at a really high level to really be able to narrow issues down on the student instruments as well.
Oh yeah. I've always been annoyed when the neck is too long, like I don't know how to describe it, but when it's too deep. Right. Because I've had some instruments, the neck is really big this way, and I don't know, it just drives me nuts. And when it's, the really nice instruments aren't going to be huge like that. You're going to be able to fly with your hand.
And those instruments, that's what we don't carry, right? Yeah. So if it's not if that instrument doesn't work as a student instrument, then we don't carry it. Yeah. So that's part of the quality control of that student line. You actually have to have a higher level of quality control for the student line, because there's more of them, and make sure everything is correct.
Right. Yeah. I would think that the high neck and then the high action and stuff, I mean, that's going to create a ton of tension for even a fifth grader, and they're going to probably get maybe the fifth grader wouldn't even understand that I don't have to have this much.
But the student would just get irritated, and says, "Well, I can't play this, or this is too difficult," and then not go on.
That's not good for anybody.
That's not good. That's not good for anybody.
So really quickly, I know that your mentor Ursa Ashley.
Yes.
I have one of his violas
Right.
downstairs, which I'm not going to go get now. But can you talk just a tiny bit about like how you even wanted to do any of this, or like
since I was a kid, I was always into art, models, building tons of these plastic models, and ordering actually models from Smithsonian Institute, building like this Wright Brothers plane. Took half a year out of little balsa wood, and always into that. And then my father took me to Ursa Ashley to repair a bass. And when I was 12, and I saw this guy working with his hands, making a living doing something with his hands, and I go, I had no idea. I thought you had to become like an accountant,
Right.
or an engineer, right? Or something I knew I'd be designing, right? In that sense, but I thought you have to funnel into a standard field. And then I saw this man that was repairing and making instruments, and I go, wow.
Yeah.
And so I went there every day in the summertime, every Saturday, and until I finished high school, and then I realized, hey, this is what I want to do, and I went to professional trade school for violin making in Salt Lake City, and that's how it started. But it just happened to be the right time, because he was already in his late 70s at that point, and he was just kind of doing stuff for fun, not so much for business, and so he didn't mind taking on a young whippersnapper apprentice.
Nice of him.
And I actually on YouTube, it was great. There was a camera crew that came in, and they filmed while he was there, and I was there carving a scroll
that day,
full head of hair. It's there, and he's talking, and I'm behind him, and he said all my sons, they went into engineering and other fields, and Anton here, he's like my son because he wanted to do this, right?
That's neat.
So it was kind of like a passing on this tradition that he couldn't do to his son. So it was a wonderful relationship. Yeah.
That's neat. Yeah. So like with the shop in general, we haven't had any luthiers or guitar makers or anything on the shop. I'd love to hear just like some behind the scenes stuff at the violin shop. Like I know one that we were mentioning before the show is that you hear this all the time, where I get calls all the time from people who are like, can you come look at my violin? I want to see before I take it into the shop. I want to see, is this thing going to be, well, I think it's a Strat, but, and I look in the copy, it says copy. But, I mean, do you guys get that like a lot?
Every other week, somebody comes in with an old instrument. By now, everyone's used to and understands that it's a copy, because when you type in Stradivarius, everyone on the internet goes, you don't have anything, believe me, it's a cheap violin. But before the internet, nobody knew. They would just read on the inside, and it said Stradivari, Guarneri, and they would know, right? And so they'd come in, and they're all excited. A decade and before, everyone's excited that they may have something, because it does. It looks old,
right?
There's a Stradivarius and a label inside, and so nowadays everyone's pretty wise to it, because that's the first thing on the internet. It's like, you don't have anything, believe me, right? So they're already prepared for that. But 10 years and before, nobody was, and so everyone was coming in with these high hopes, and we were always the bearer of bad news.
Yeah, the bad guy. Yeah.
Right.
Well, they always have because whatever they bring in was probably like 1910 or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's old, but not really.
Yeah. I mean, the Germans produced millions of instruments, millions in the mid 1800s to the early 1900s. And you could find them in Sears and Roebuck catalogs for $1.50 violin case and bow, for $2.50 violin case and bow. And if you really want to splurge, just go all out, pay the $4.
Right. Yeah.
And in Sears and Roebuck, you could get everything back then, from violins to shovels to wives. You just order everything, right?
Yeah.
And it's true. So you got everything there. And so these German instruments had an outlet through the Sears catalog to go through the entire United States in a way that they just wouldn't ever have. And that's why you find German instruments in somebody's attic somewhere in Waskiki, because the Sears and Roebuck catalog spread them out far and wide, and so that that's why everyone everyone knows of somebody that they found this old instrument.
Yeah, I know mine that I have. It's a French one from like 1920-ish, and it's like Geronimo, I think, or something. But it was fun the other day. I was looking, went on the internet and I typed in the name, and so when the hell was this guy? I mean, like even what decade? And it said kind of 1910, 1930, around in there in France, and they said their average, 2 to 4,000, 3,000, somewhere in there. I'm like, okay, that sounds about right, but it sucks when you look in there and there's nothing. I mean, you got no label or anything. I just don't even know how you guys like. I mean, I guess country is a little bit too. France, Germany,
you have to just
Russia.
look at tens of thousands of instruments, and everyone in each field understands their product. Like for instance, somebody that really understands cars, they could look a block away and say, that's a 1957 Chevelle, only 5 made, and I would look at it, I don't even know what it is, and versus what year. And he says, oh yeah, because the bumper's like this and this. So people that know, right, whether it's furniture, houses, car, anything, people that know their field, just by looking and understanding, tens of thousands of those items, they understand what that is. So that's the big, the big aspect of just understanding instruments because of looking at tens of thousands of them.
Yeah, sure. Right. And like when you guys are when you're making instruments, what's something that, like a mistake maybe, or something that a lot of younger makers, is there some things that younger makers typically tend to do, or something that you guys specifically try to stay away from?
So this is the interesting part about string instruments. That very few people understand, even restorers and violin shops, is that when I went through violin making school, I thought it was all about crafting a great instrument. So what we did in violin making school, we took 3 years making instruments, all we call in the white, just making instruments, and then the 4th year we went and varnished them all, right? And so you learn how to make instruments and be a great craftsman. And then when I varnished them, they all sounded like these German instruments. It sounded, and I go, well, this is ridiculous. I'm going to be making instruments, and they're going to sound just like the German factory instruments that are being mass produced. At that time, this was before China. And so at that point, I realized that it's about the finish on the instrument. It's not about your craftsmanship. And that bore out when I went to restore instruments, because I saw Italian instruments that looked like they were made out of a fence post. The quality of workmanship was awful. They weren't any good at all. And so this is something that I realized. Okay, the finish on these lower level Italian instruments made them an Italian instrument, right? It's not the workmanship. And it also bore out with history, because yes, Stradivari, Amati, high-end makers, they can make a living full-time making instruments, but most everyone else was farmers. And so in the summer and spring months, they farmed, and in the winter months, they did other things. So some people made furniture, and some people made violins, right? And so that's why you find a lot of Italian instruments, a lot of instruments in general, that are bad workmanship, bad wood, because these guys were just making instruments part-time, right? But the Italians had a finish that made an Italian sound, what I call the bel canto sound, or a voice quality sound. And so my entire time after I understood this, and after going into restoration and seeing these Italian instruments, and really it hitting home that it is all about the finish.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
And most violin restorers and shops, they don't know that. They focus on, here's the workmanship this and workmanship that. Very small, very small part of it to do with that sound. And that's why when our logo for our Krutz line of instruments is creating the voice of strings. So if you go, we have two actually separate companies, KC Strings and Krutz Instruments. And KC Strings is the flagship store for Krutz Instruments that we sell really all over the world. And the voice of strings is that it's not no longer just a string sound, it's a voice sound. Because the unique aspect of why these Italian instruments are are millions of dollars. You go into Strat. Why are they that way? It's because of this voice quality where you have a metal string in a wooden box, and yet when you play it, it's producing a voice quality. And a voice is a divine element because it takes three divine elements of moisture, heat, and air. You can't have a voice underwater. You can't have a voice in the vacuum of space. You can't have a voice if it's completely dry in the desert. So it takes these three divine elements where everything else can exist in two. You could have botany grow underneath water. You can have viruses and bacteria survive in the vacuum of space. And that's why, you have in the Bible said, God said everything starts with a voice, because that is something that takes three elements to be in existence.
Wow.
And yet this string instrument, having a metal string in a wooden box, produces this voice quality when it has an Italian finish, when that recipe is. So my entire times from the time I left New York and came to Kansas City and started making instruments was to experiment with the varnishes to get back this recipe that was lost. And that was my focus, and it worked out fantastic with the business side of KC Strings, because as these teachers came in and said, hey, can we have student instruments, not just your up the line? I go, great, let me make these kind of student level model instruments, and I'm going to experiment and improve my my varnish skills. And so the student gets a great instrument, far better than they could at the same price range, and I get to experiment. And so that's the unique part about making that people don't know. And so I blew up varnishes, lit my leg on fire. I had things explode. I mean, I was experimenting because you have to get back to this recipe of and understand what they used, how they used it, what's going on, going into the physics, the acoustics of it, the chemistry of it. You really have to bore deep into it to understand what's going on with the finish and.
I always knew you were a mad scientist.
Yeah, I was. It really was. At that time, I was doing a lot of things till I found that the general recipe, and now there's kind of tweaking of it. But it's that was the big push in understanding what was that finish, and now I feel I have a finish that uses modern equivalents to things that they had back then that you can't even get now. And getting that that voice quality in the sound, and that's why they're in major symphonies around the country, and we put that finish on our midline instruments to give the student a better sound. Yeah,
that's cool. I know, kind of last thing here about the actual making of it. I heard the other day, and I didn't really know this, that this is probably another thing that you get a lot, where people will leave it in the car. Right, yes. And the heat. I'm sure that happens all the time, and I have that too when my student comes in, and I'll and they hand the viola or something to me to tune, and it's like just cold. I mean, it's got to be 40 degrees,
right?
And they're like, oh, I practiced all week. I'm like, oh, sure you did, and I mean, this has been sitting in the car, but I think maybe it was you guys that were talking about that. Humidity screws with the instruments more than heat. Is that true?
Both do. Heat, humidity. I mean, a cold heat and humidity. Those are the three extremes on either three of those. Right. It's going to affect the instrument. Yeah. So it just depends on how extreme. Sure. But all three of them definitely affect the instrument. The cold by itself may not affect as much as say heat, but what happens in the cold is that the heater turns on and it dries out the air, so the air's already very dry to begin with, and then the heater dries out the air, and so you have extra
humidity.
So now you're getting to an extreme humidity from the cold, and so people go, well, but I was certainly not that cold, but the fact that it's inside the house or outside where it's really dry does affect it.
Yeah, cool. So another thing that I'll just mention really fast is that this guy I've been watching, Jordan Peterson, talks about personality traits, and he talks about like musicians and how creative people typically score high on this thing called openness, like openness to experiences or whatever. And what he says that a lot of times creative people typically don't score high on a thing called orderliness, which is what like accountants would score high, And so the point I'm making is that a lot of us musicians, we've talked about this on the show, are really bad at doing like advertising and being organized. A lot of musicians, we're showing up late, we're like being flaky and stuff. Right. But I've always been impressed by your guys' shop, how, I'll get on Google and you guys are all over that, just like emotionally all over that, I get the impression that, and I won't, mention his name, but there's another maker in town that is, hasn't done what you guys have done with two different shops or whatever, and you already know who I'm talking about. But my opinion of one of the reasons is that you guys have gone all over the advertising. I think he hasn't. Right. That's my opinion, But anyway, is that sort of like obviously really important to you guys to have that under control? Because I think a lot of musicians don't even want to care about that, and that's one of the reasons why they're not working.
Well, it's actually, this is a segue topic, but it's social media. Yeah. And it used to be that advertising, you could put an ad in the paper, you could put an ad on radio, you could put an ad in the magazine. All those don't work anymore. Yeah. All those don't work. And so I started realizing that early on. It's like, this is not working, none of it's working. And most of the best advertising, as is word of mouth. Yeah. But social media is the word of mouth in the digital age. Yeah. That's what it is. And so as I started getting into it, I didn't understand what social media was about. I thought it was about posting pictures of food. I didn't get it. And then as I started learning and talking to social media experts and getting them involved and initially paid them for consultations and understood that really social media is about social proof. And so for instance, it's like the old saying, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody sees it or hears it, did it fall? Well, the thing is, you can do so many things. You could be an incredible musician. You could go to this concert. You could be an incredible maker. You could do this. But if you don't put it on social media, it didn't happen. Right. Okay. So the social media provides social proof that you actually did these things. And so when you achieve whatever you do as a musician, when you achieve whatever you do as a teacher, when you achieve anything you do as a business person or as a violin maker, if I don't put it out there on social media and put a social proof, documenting, then I'm not leveraging the investment that I made in what I've done in my life, because that's what the digital age is about. And so the advice, tool. The advice I could give from really learning a lot about it, because we have a social media admin within our shop, and that does all that. And so the advice I give sometimes to musicians, and if they ask, is I say all of social media right now is using you as a product. They're selling you. Yeah. So every time you post anything that doesn't have to do with your business, they're using that to advertise to you. Mm-hmm. So what you need to do is use them as a tool back. Mm-hmm. And so you do that by forget the politics, forget the food, forget everything else. In your business, strings, if that's your business, then that's what you post, So this is what you did. This is the concert. This is what you did with people. Mm-hmm. Everything around that whole field of strings. That's what you post, and you document in social proof what you do and what you have and what you've invested in. And at that point, then social media becomes a tool for you, rather than you becoming a product of theirs, and that's the paradigm shift that artists need to understand, and it looks to everyone else like, oh, this artist is just putting up fun stuff about that that they went here, went there. I said, yeah, but when you go somewhere, don't put up the restaurant photos, don't put up this, put up everything that has to do with, here's the concert I played, here's the people, so it still looks like you're putting up interesting content, right, but it happens to be all about your field, right, about what you do, about your experience, about your expertise. And that's the social proof about what you've done in your life. And so that's how I see social media. And what we do, we don't sell anything on social media. We do not have any sale. We don't have anything. Mm-hmm. What we do is we constantly just put up content that I think our customers would find relevant, our teachers would find relevant, the parents would find relevant. Just content. Here is interesting things. Engage with us, because we're going to provide you interesting information that only we as a shop with our experience can can provide. And then other fun stuff. We had just sponsored like string camps, and we had pictures of these kids in string camps, and donated some instruments because some kids wanted to play, and so we do all these things for the community. Yeah, and we document that. We say, hey, we're doing these fun things, and we're doing these cool things, and we're helping our strings community, and that's part of the content. But it's not like we're selling anything. This is about here's what we're doing for the community.
Sure.
And that's how we view social media.
Sure, yeah, and your name.
Right.
And when people think of something, like this happens to us all the time, where we all have our Rolodex, as musicians, how many trumpet players do you know?
Sure.
How many, and so you want your name, at the top of everybody's list all the time, just because you're sitting there posting stupid stuff, that, and people see your name all the time. But like in regards to what is today, I know you and I have talked a bunch of different times about kind of strings today and sort of the state of our string music. I know one time you and I were talking about being understanding of the I can't think of the word, but the status of the symphonies.
Yes.
About when the symphonies go, what's going to happen? With in regards to music in the schools, are they going to feel this is a worthy thing to keep around? And then I know that you were talking about I can't think of the guy's name. But anyway, you and I were talking a lot about like improv and doing.
Eugene Friesen. Maybe he's director of strings at Berkeley, Berkeley School of Music in Boston, but I know a lot of improvisation people, but yeah, we're all looking at kind of the state of strings, and when we started years and years ago, what I was noticing was that more and more symphonies were going bankrupt, and it happened when the Philadelphia Symphony, which was an iconic symphony, it went out of business, and I'm going, wow, this is the trend is going so you're going to have 20 major symphonies in the U.S. and that's it, and I was trying to understand what was going on, and the issue is that this music is available everywhere, whereas obviously centuries ago you had to go to the concert to hear it, and now music is everywhere, and they have to play new music, interesting music. That you have to bring in young kids, and the symphonies are kind of doing that with movie music. They're putting the movie on and playing the music, and they're trying to do do different things. But what I understood from the kind of the paradigm that was happening is that the string players need to learn to improvise, something that you do naturally, something a lot of players do. It's not happening as a structured process, and to me, everything, being in business, being in violin making, everything. If you can't, I always say, if you can't explain what you're talking about as a process, you don't know what you're talking about. So as a teacher, say, here's the process. You hold your hand this way. Hold it. This is the way you play. Same thing in violin making. And so when I'm looking at symphonies, having issues, I'm going, what's the process, that behind this, and the process to me is that there needs to be more improvisation taught as a process to kids, so that they could get together and play new music and perform new music, because I always say that if rock and roll was delegated only to play the classics of Chuck Berry and Elvis, it would be also diminishing, right?
Oh, sure.
So it's the fact that these kids were shunned, from schools, and they had to get together, back alleys and homes and garages, and learn to improvise, right? and learn to play new music and create. And so the idea that the string player is delegated to sit down, play the music that the composer wrote for him would be an absurdity in the rock and roll world. It's like saying, Paul McCartney, please sit down, play your guitar, and wait for somebody else to, write the music for you, right?
We recreate.
Yeah.
We don't create.
And so as a system, what I realized that we have to have in orchestras, not only the concert where you're playing the standard classics and whatnot, but you have to have a system of improvisation. And so I'm working on creating that system. I'm working on creating online platforms for kids to get together and communicate musically, because I feel that's what the digital age can provide is this platform for kids to get together and find each other on a creative basis that kids were doing for half a decade physically in the rock world.
Sure.
So that's where I feel the solution is the improvisation, so that kids have a platform to play and find each other and continue playing after high school, because right now you have all these kids in high school orchestra, but then 99% of them quit. They don't play again.
Yeah.
But you look at Guitar Center. 95% of their customer base, they're adults.
Yeah.
They're adults.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the majority of adults, 99% of the adults that come in, they're buying instruments for their kids.
Right.
And 1%, I want to play. I played when I was younger. I want to do it again. I want to have this. But we need to change it where the string playing is not, hey, after high school it ends. Because it doesn't end for guitarists, for drummers, for keyboardists, but it does in strings. And so there needs to be a platform, a wider platform for that. And I was working with Folk Alliance, which is a big organization that has music. They have acoustic music, is not only strings but also strings, but with guitars and banjos and things like that. But at least they already have a platform. But those tend to be kind of folk music. But I want the string players, the bowed string players, to also have a platform to be able to continue playing as adults.
Sure. Yeah. It cracks me up when I have a student and I'll finally ask them, because they're all ready for me to tell them, okay, what piece am I playing?
Right.
They never have it, because all the other kids go, I want to play Smoke on the Water, I want to play some 70s rock tune. The guitar players, they already have an idea.
Right.
And I go, so what music do you like? They're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, do you have a favorite song? They're like, well, I don't know if I really love music. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do with this? And so I would love to get a lot of my students, because I take my students through some Suzuki books, and I'll do the classical stuff, but when they're kind of ready, 4 years in, I'll kind of start doing some improv with them, and it usually works good, when they have some talent first, but it always cracks me up when, like, I was use this as an example where the orchestra teacher will come up with like a Grease medley or something, from the musical Grease, or some Nintendo music that they've written out for orchestra, or the pop series kind of stuff. And I understand why they want to do that, because they're trying to keep the kids engaged, but a lot of the teachers don't know what they're doing. Like you said, they've never improv before.
Right.
And they're ready to, they're going to start teaching improv, but they've never done it. And so, like, I guess you're talking about you start young, and then that feeds into itself with the next generation of teachers having improv as the as the mentality, and I don't know what to do about that now. Like, for the next 6 months or a year, how do we start?
I'm working right now with some teachers, pedagogues, to create this improvisation system that can scale. Because to me, in Silicon Valley, they have a great saying that says, if you can't scale, it gets stale, right? And so I'm looking at trying to create an improvisation system that can scale and that kids can learn, and so because I see that as part of the solution, because I don't want I never, as an individual, I don't never want to like, well, here's the problem, well, somebody else figure it out, right? I'm always a proactive guy, so I'm going, okay, I here, this is how I understand the problem, so I'm going to put my time and money into investing into see what can be done, because improvisation right now is you know how to do it because you've learned it, and somebody else that does it, they know a little bit, but until it can scale from school to school to school to school and easily, then to me that's not a system that's sustainable. And so I'm taking kind of a business approach, a process approach to this, and I see that as one aspect to making orchestra and strings in school more relevant to kids, is having having a process from improvisation that's scalable and that everyone knows. So if everyone around the country has started with the same process, then they can move forward and build on it. Versus if everyone did it completely differently, they may have difficulty trying to communicate.
Right.
So to me, improvisation is a language, and so if we teach the basics that are scalable to kids across the country, and that are easy enough to for teachers to help guide, then it's something that improvisation as a process can be utilized everywhere.
Sure. Yeah, I know you guys have started to kind of get into the 5 strings, and I know you guys have gotten a couple amps at your shop, and started to kind of at least think a little bit in that way, where a lot of other I think a lot of other makers would be like, oh, well, country music or whatever, I mean, they kind of scoff at that. I know that's a problem with string players in general, like the classical people. They go, oh, you play country, and I'm like, yeah, but you can't do it. Right. So why are you dogging country? You're gonna pee your pants getting up on the stage right now playing blues, and so I don't like that people like kind of push something out. And I think every genre of player, there's people in every genre that kind of do that, where the blues guys go, oh, you play jazz, okay, yeah, mister, he thinks he's so much better than everybody, that you've got your nose up at everybody else, you jazz player or whatever. And I don't know what to do about that. You're talking about the scale problem of, you can go talk to one person at a time for your whole life, but I don't know what to do about that problem, because there's a lot of people that think like that.
Right. I've come across that, and Eugene Friesen, when I was talking to him, again, he's the director of strings at Berkeley, and he said, and he does improvisation, and it's the only school that really is teaching that on a really consistent basis. And he said that the entire his words, the entire classical field has gotten calcified. That's what he was using. Calcified. I go, wow, I'm gonna steal that word, and after 4 centuries, you have to bring in new things, and to me the process, if you have kids improvising and they can create, the urge to create and the drive to create is so strong, it'll overcome any calcified aspect, because you want to create. It doesn't. The reason you can brush off comments is because you can create, right? You can create music, and so you're comfortable, and you're driven by that, and it's purpose driven, right? And so when these kids can do that, and it's and they know that, oh, I'm not just a player that has to sit down and play somebody else's music. I can create, even if it's simple things. I can create music, and I can create with somebody else. And the thing is, once you have more and more kids doing that, then in time you're going to have really good string groups. It's not going to be just Lindsey Sterling, whatever, or Turline String Quartet. You're going to have a lot of groups, and they're going to go in, and they're going to be the opening act in a symphony to attract the teenagers to come in and hear them, and then the teenagers stay for Tchaikovsky, right? We know that model. It's called the rock model, right? There's opening acts, right? Yeah. So we don't have to create anything new in terms of models. There's the model there. have young kids that are just creating awesome bowstring music, be the opening acts in symphonies. All the kids come and stay for Tchaikovsky, right? So that's how I see it working, but it starts with a scalable process for improvisation, and that goes around schools that say, well, we don't have the time, we have to do these concerts. Great, these kids can do this on their own, and they will if they have a system to train them and to be able to then communicate online and interact musically, right?
Sure.
So it's a pretty in-depth plan I'm trying to do, and so until I actually have it, so I'm talking about it now. When I don't have something, I actually don't even like talking about things that I don't have done, because I'm an action guy. So when I have it, then I'll be back here saying, here it is. This is what you could do. These are the kids. We've tried this. We've tested it. This works. Let's look at this, and you could see videos and things like that.
Right.
But it answered the long answer to your question about what I think it can be done to help strings. One aspect is that improvisation.
Sure. I know that, like, I keep asking you kind of the creativity questions because it's fascinating to me. Like, again, this guy mentioned this Jordan Peterson. He was joking about this orderliness thing. It's just personality trait of somebody that, well, we have something that sort of works, so we're just going to accidentally keep doing it forever. Right. And he was joking that when you have like creative things, he's like, 49 out of 50 ideas are terrible.
Sure.
They're horrible.
Right,
but
right.
One is like electricity.
Right.
To completely, changes the entire world. And so he's like, we have to, I mean, this is what we both kind of keep saying, is that we have a system at schools, and specifically because so many kids are in the public schools, that they just aren't geared towards creativity at all.
Right.
It's all just test, not even in strings, but the whole system. And I think I was looking at your Global Strings Alliance website, and you had that Einstein quote on there, that was, I can't exactly remember the quote, but it's basically like, it's not going to be...
I see my life through music as one, and then it's not going to be the periodic tables and all it's going to be the creativity that needs to be taught.
Right. Yeah. That was it. Yeah.
So one of the things that I do already have up, that's already finished, that I could talk about credibly is I have a new site called Global Strings Alliance, and on there I have an advocacy resources link, and it talks about how music affects the brain. There's many articles. I've made a video on that, and one of the advocacy points that I talk to string teachers and really try to make them understand, so they can have this argument to use with administrators and parents, is that music has effect on the mind and the brain that can really spur creativity. Mm-hmm. And when the rest of education is literally it's about a century behind, because a century ago there was a teacher in front, there were students at their desks, and they were using books. Now you have a teacher in front and student at the desk maybe using iPads, but it's the same process. If you look at what we have like in the ER room now, and you look at the ER in 100 years ago, mm-hmm. a doctor from 100 years ago wouldn't even know what's going on, right? Sure. So it's changed so much. And so
didn't they say every 7 years is obsolete?
Right.
In the medical field?
And so in education, we used to, for thousands of years, memorizing information was the key to not only success but of survival. So if you had information that was not easily or publicly accessible, that was strength. So if you knew about how to make metal out of rock, in iron ore, then you had an advantage. When you knew about sizes of armies, when you knew about how to grow food, when you knew
without
anything.
Your iPhone to tell
you.
Yeah.
Then information was, and so that continued. But at this point, information has become a free commodity. that's accessible to anybody with internet access. So a kid in India has the same access to the same information that a Fortune 500 CEO does. And so information no longer has any value. So there's no point in memorizing, regurgitating, and then being graded on how well you regurgitate this information, because that whole process it just makes you compete with the iPhone. And the issue is that every student intuitively knows that. We have intuition. Intuitively, you know when you're being lied to. Intuitively, you know when you're being told to do things that are counterproductive. And intuitively, every single student understands that when they're being forced to memorize and regurgitate and being graded on how well they do that, that is counterproductive because they can look up that information. So what they're doing is memorizing, regurgitating, and then forgetting it. Memorize, regurgitate, forgetting. Because that's a survival. It's a survival process that they're doing. And what education needs to become and will be forced to become very soon is not how well you can regurgitate, memorize information, but how fast you can search for information, find the relevant information, and then aggregate it into something new, innovation. And that's creativity. Is being able to create something, something new, and what I call a new paradigm. And music does that all the time. Music and art do that. On Global Strings Alliance, I have a definition of music and art. There's many books written on it, and a lot of a lot of people talk about it. But I have one sentence, and I say music is liquid art, and art is frozen music.
Yeah.
So music and art are one and the same, and they have the same effect on the brain. Because to be an artist and a musician, you have to see that future paradigm. Where you're going. You have to have this connecting paradigm between what the future is, what the music or the art looks like, and then you also have to be working in a changing environment. Okay, and that is the definition of creativity that I hopefully in time all society can collectively share. Because right now everyone says, "Oh, you put these two Lego blocks together. That's so creative." No, that's not creativity. No. Creativity, you have to be creating new. You have to create a new paradigm, a connecting paradigm. Work with a present paradigm, and then do that and function effectively. And that's creativity. And so artists and musicians are doing that. And what that does is rewire the brain to be more creative and therefore be competitive and relevant in the future. Because AI, everyone knows that AI now can create new images in photos and video. AI has beaten humans at board games like Go and chess. AI has beaten humans in debate. AI can look up thousands and thousands of documents. So AI has now, in terms of medicine, it's beaten the best doctors at analyzing medical conditions, because it goes through thousands and thousands of new medical documents every year that's produced that the doctor can't. So in time, the only viable skill set is not going to be the hard skills of that they're teaching in STEM. It's going to be the skill of creativity. And music and art really are catalysts for that process.
Sure.
And so what I tell string teachers, and what I have on the Global Strings Alliance advocacy page, is that music and especially strings is at the pinnacle of that, is going to be the most important class in U.S. education. The most important class, say 5-10 years from now, because all the other classes are going to be teaching teaching skills that are going to be done by AI much better. So you either can use artificial intelligence as a tool, which it is, if you're creative, or you're going to be made obsolete by it. And so you're not going to have pills or anything else to make your mind. If you take a caffeine pill or drink caffeine, your mind works quicker, but that's not more creative. It's wired. So the only thing that's gonna the only action that's really gonna empower creativity is going to be music and art. Art is much slower. Music is faster. And at the pinnacle of music, the music that does it the most intensely is strings. And so in time, I believe that you're going to have students take strings if they want to be an engineer or physicist or scientist or do coding. things that will absolutely require creativity, they're going to have to take strings. So right now, the kids that take strings are the ones that want to play strings, right? And so they're all like musician oriented. But in time, you're going to have kids that go, I never even thought about strings, and they're going to have to do it because it's going to be a cognitive workout, just like an athlete must do a physical workout with weights. I think in 10 years, you're going to have students do a cognitive workout with strings, because that's going to be the training that stimulates creativity.
Yeah, I had a homeschool kid, and he was like making clocks and like robots with his dad. He was doing a lot of like engineering kind of stuff, and he was like 6th grade-ish. But anyway, he had a like clock business with his dad.
Yes.
It was pretty neat. But anyway, so they were already looking ahead for like Caltech, MIT. He was a pretty smart kid.
Right.
And so they went up to MIT, and MIT told them that pretty much starting in the last couple of years, we're basically only taking applicants that have had some music. And I was like, holy crap.
Yes.
That's the best advocacy I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Like in a sentence, they're like, we want people who have had music, because that does something very, very specific with your brain, and we know it because we do research on that shit all day.
But let me give you an interesting insight. Is that they know it does something interesting, but they don't know the process behind why. Because it's sort of like when humans were first starting to farm, they noticed, you put a seed in a desert, it doesn't grow. You put a seed in dirt, it's just dry, it didn't grow. But you put a seed in dirt, and that's wet, things grow. So just by process of elimination, they see. So MIT and other universities, they see that, wow, all these individuals that have music training, they have these aspects that are beneficial. And so part of my concepts in advocacy is not just saying, hey, I've noticed these things just like MIT and everybody else. I've come through with a new brain-mind dynamic model that's really more advanced than neuroscience. And it talks about how the brain is actually a biological motherboard, just like a computer, and the mind is an operating system, just like a computer. So if you look at a computer and you don't know how it works, you would see current going through this, these mechanical parts, and you think, oh, these mechanical parts are creating this image that we see on screen. But we know how computers work. We know there's an operating system doing that. And so the mind really is the operating system, and the brain is the biological motherboard. And so what's happening in music, the process behind it, again, going back to, if you can't explain what you're talking about as a process, you don't know what you're talking about. The process behind music and why it is such a powerful stimulus is that a music is a catalyst for the mind working. And while in the computer you have to replace the hardware parts that get outdated, the mind is actually rewiring the brain. Yeah. And so as the mind is forced to work stronger and more because the music is forcing it to work, it's rewiring the brain more effectively, and so then the brain can use the mind. And so that's why when you learn something new, it's really hard at first, because your mind is really working, your brain is wired, still wired not to accept everything new. Well, once you learn it, it becomes easier. What's happening is your mind has now rewired your brain, and it's becoming easier and easier. Right. And so the music, that's the catalyst. The strings is the highest form of that catalyst, and that's why in time, for that skill of creativity, which regular education will start teaching, will be forced to start teaching. Music will be at the heart of it, because that's what MIT's noticing, everyone else is noticing, and then they'll start understanding. Okay, this is what music does to help stimulate the mind.
Yeah, because I've been telling some of my students that, like what you said of why is this happening? Well, you're linking up brain with physical. That's one thing. They're a little bit different than sports. Sports, you're still definitely using your brain, but it's not the same at all as like playing violin. And then the left brain, right brain thing has got to be something in there with the concrete and the abstract.
Sure.
You have this creativity going on, but also the kind of orderly concrete kind of stuff going on. And I've been telling, and then you also have the kind of mathematical and emotional too. There's it's like hitting these 19 things all at the same time. You know, that's kind of what you're getting at, right?
Right. Yeah. There's again, I always revert back to comparison because relativity is what gives you clarity. So for instance, you don't know what light is until there's dark, right? So if you're right next to the sun, you can't call it light because you don't have any darkness. You know, the reason we can see each other is not because of light, it's because there's darkness in between the light. The reason you can hear something and it's music is because there's space in between the sound. Because if sound had no space, it'd just be noise.
Yeah.
Okay? So you can't have an up without a down, you can't have a positive without a negative, and so relativity. So in order to understand the aspects of the mind and creativity, you have to look at artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence, for instance, will not have emotion. And so that's emotion intuition. That is a human and actually biological, because even a fly has emotion. Because when you're swatting at it, you know, it's my flying out slow. So when you swat at a fly, all of a sudden, boom, it's going like 10 times faster, right? It's freaked out, right? So it had an intuitive emotional response. So all biological bodies have intuition and emotion, but the most complex biological body is the human, and so we have the most complex emotion. And so that is stimulated by music. It's stimulated by art, then stimulated more by woodwind brass instruments, and then stimulated the most by strings. And so that's part of an understanding that's the uniqueness of a human being, is our intuition and emotion, because our intelligence is slower than AI intelligence. AI intelligence, along with quantum computing, big data, you're going to find AI on a smartphone app that's going to do engineering, right? And so in 10 years, if you have a smartphone engineering app that's going to be AI, big data, quantum computing, cloud-based, and it does in 1 hour what 1,000 engineers do now, you got to go, okay, teaching this STEM product to memorize these things no longer is valid. And so now you're getting into the creativity and go, how do I amplify the creativity and what are we doing? And so again, education is going to figure out how to do that, but who's going to stimulate the most are going to be the musicians, right? And so it's slowly happening now. But as a process, this is what strings can do, and that's why even now, all the string string orchestra teachers, they could go through all their kids, and they're always at the top of their class, grades, this, that, always. So there's documentation that it has an effect now. But what I'm doing on Global Strings Alliance, the resources page, is putting into a process where you could say, this is why it's happening, this is why we're important. And so instead of the string teacher pleading, hey, don't cut us, I know, STEM's more important, you're going to the administrator, you're going to the parent and saying, we are the most important class in U.S. education today, right now. And what I'm doing is providing the resources and the content and the data to be able to make that statement.
Yeah, wow, I think you're right on that. So we're probably wrapping up here, and again, owner of Casey Strings. If you guys are ever talk to string players or whatever, send them down to his shop. They're definitely doing it right. Got range instruments from professional to student, and but definitely I've always been supportive of you guys' shop, and I think you guys are doing it right. And there you go, Anton Krutz.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, man.
Appreciate it.
There you go. Get out of here. We'll see you later.